The film look, nice color separation, film grain, pretty hues, blossoming highlights, just overall nostalgic and vintage. I'm going to show you how to do it in a pretty basic way that you can do on any editing software, but today I'm doing DaVinci because it's my preferred software for coloring. I'm going to separate this video into two parts, one being color correction and the best way to achieve the correct look, and the other being color grading, where I'll show you guys the simple way that I achieve the film look. Today I'll be using a film emulation plugin called Dehancer. Dehancer does have a 2-week free trial if you'd like to download it and follow along, and yeah, let's load up the footage and hop right in. Okay, so for our first shot, we have a master shot from the music video that I just directed. Currently, this shot is in a flat profile that has no saturation and not really much contrast. We can fix this through Dehancer pretty easily. Alright, now what we want to do is take this footage and put it into the correct color profile. What we can do is we can take the Dehancer Pro plugin that I just searched in the Effects tab right here, type in Dehancer, and drag and drop it onto this node. Then you're going to want to hold Option and click, and that will condense everything down. Automatically film grain will be turned on, so you can turn that off, and automatically film will be turned on, so you can also turn that off. For input, you can put in the exact camera that you shot this with. This camera was shot by a cinematographer that I worked with on an FX3 Sony. So this will simply take this footage and put it into the correct color space that you can start working from. It's really easy, and I really love this feature by Dehancer. So this is what the image looks like before and after with the initial transform, and now we're going to start color correcting. So for the color correction, we can create 4 nodes. You can create these nodes by holding Shift and clicking S to go behind, and we can drag them up and put them in order so they're nice and neat. So this node will be balance. This node will be exposure, this node will be contrast, this node will be saturation. So you can do all these things in Dehancer, but I like to put these 4 specific things usually before it so I can isolate one or the other and see where the problem is if something doesn't look right. Alright, so starting off with balance, we simply want to balance the green versus magenta and the cool versus warm correct white balancing. So those are the 2 spectrums that we're going to be working with. So the easiest way to do this, and will seriously save you so much time, is to simply go to the balance, right click and go to gamma, and then go to linear. And now it's in a linear color space. So what that means is when you go to the HDR tab right here, and you go to the global wheel, everything will move together. Instead of you having to isolate one thing and balance it out, it'll all move as a unit, making it a lot easier. So let's reset that global tab. And as you can see, the image actually looks from the eye test pretty perfectly white balanced. So I think for this, we can leave it alone. But a good way to check that is look at the tops of these color spectrums right here. The top of the blue, the top of the green, the top of the red, they all look about even. So yeah, let's move on to the next one. And then maybe we can lower it a touch on the exposure. The best way to do this is go to the HDR tab, go to the global wheel, go to the exposure right under the global wheel, and it'll just move everything together as a unit. So since everything is a little high, we're gonna just move it down a touch. And if you hold Command D, you can disable and re-enable a node. So let's disable it and do Command F to full screen it. And then let's hold Command D. And the difference is actually undetectable to the eye, but it's just little tweaks we're gonna be doing. Now for the contrast, I really like to work within the custom curves. I just think it gives this image such a good pop. The easiest way to do this is to grab this tab right here, click on the higher end, click on the lower end of the spectrum, and just keep an eye on this parade. So you don't want things to hit 0 or below, because that means that it's a complete loss of information. That means that it's too dark or too bright. So I'm gonna do a touch up on the wheel, and then I'm gonna go here and maybe go about here. And again, I mean, this is almost undetectable because the image was shot perfectly out of camera, which is super ideal. So this is a fairly easy image to color correct before we color grade. And now with the saturation, so I'm going with this look, I want to go for a pop in the hoodie. He has an orange hoodie. I can show you a better hero shot. And my goal is to have this hoodie really pop out and be the focal point of this image. So for saturation, if I did want to lower it, because maybe it's a bit bright, I can go to the HDR tab. I can go down the global side and I can lower the saturation, and it's going to look a little bit subtle. But as you can see, it's a little bit less aggressive and a little bit more realistic looking. So I don't know if I want to make it unrealistic looking or realistic looking yet. So we're gonna leave that alone for now. Okay, so now it's time for the Dehancer. So in Dehancer, I like to do a couple things to get the look really good. So we can go down the list. So we already have the input in. Film developer, we're not gonna touch for now, because I usually would use this one to edit the color boost, but we are gonna use the color boost from the saturation node instead. So with that being said, we can go here and go to the film tab. So this tab is what simulation you want to use for your image, what film stock is going to emulate. So I can show you two that I really love, and if you want to use these, feel free. They're really great because they look like the original image but with a little bit more character to them, and the color is not that different. So I'll show you what I mean. So the first favor that I use is called the Kodak Gold 200. So I'll go ahead and throw that on, and before and after. And I love this one because it looks like a nice film look. It has a nice layer of like almost brown, and it looks very vintage. But for this shoot, I don't feel like it matches the vibe. So we're gonna go up and we're gonna go to the Cinestill 800T. And now this is a more color correct version, and it kind of looks exactly how it would look in the color science before we added it. Film compression is awesome because it pretty much just curbs the highlights. So this is the only like real aggressive highlight you can see in this image. But if you disable it, it looks blown out. And then if you re-enable it, it curbs it, doesn't blow it out. So I would recommend putting this on. Expand is fine. We're not going to use that right now. Print's really cool. You can add a print that would go deeper into the film look for a certain print, but I'm not going to use that for this color grade. And then color head. So color head is where all the personality happens within an image. This is where the fun part is. So we can go ahead and enable color head. I think my ideal colors would be maybe a hint of blue, and then the rest kind of true to its look. So in order to add a hint of blue, we can either add a cyan or a blue. I'm gonna start with the cyan and give it this like cool type of feel. And again, this is what it looks before. And then with that little hint of coolness, it kind of adds that blue feel to it. Or you can go to the right, we can add blue. But this is a little bit more thick, and it's a little bit more deep. And I think that the cyan's a little bit more, it feels like it's gonna fit the vibe. This is a very cold day, and I like the way it looks. So we're gonna leave everything else alone on color head. Film grain. So film grain's to me super important to get that film look, and I always add film grain into my images. I just feel like it gives so much character. As you can see, it's pretty thick. It almost looks too thick. I think it's really nice, but I think preferably we're gonna tone it down just a bit. I'm gonna tone this down to a 25% film grain. So it's still prevalent, but not too empowering. Actually, I think I'm gonna go all the way down to 20%. And this profile is just the intensity. 8mm is very intense, and then the 65 is more subtle, but the 35 ISO of 250 is a healthy amount for me to be happy with. Halation will just make the image have a red glow effect. We can demonstrate this by going to the 8mm no rimjet all the way up, and as you can see, halation gives this really cool look. It looks like a fairy tale type of image. I don't think I'm gonna use that for this look, but I might change my mind later. And then bloom, I honestly would highly recommend using bloom. So bloom pretty much just takes the highlights and makes them blossom. And it's just a super aesthetic and fun way to blossom your highlights, and it really looks great. So I would highly recommend using bloom, maybe a 60mm bloom, and maybe toning it down just a bit, because the more subtle is the more professional it looks. Film damage, film breath, gate weave, these are all different types of film distortions to make it look more like it was shot on film. These are imperfections that I'm not going to use for this project, but they're fun to play with. Overscan is really cool because it pretty much changes the look of your image into a classical Super 35, this type of square look. However, I'm not going to use an overscan this time, but I would highly recommend checking it out. So vignette, we're going to skip over because we already have a natural vignette out of the camera. And now for monitor. So monitor is great, and I would highly recommend getting the habit when you're using Dehancer to make sure you're using this tab. So false color is going to tell you exactly how good the exposure is. So in this image, you can see that the yellows are about high, they're very high, and the skin is blue, it's got a touch of green. So skin, typically you want it to be here and here. The salmon, the pink, and sometimes the gray. Middle gray is not a big deal because for this shot, for example, again, I'm not really going for seeing his face. I kind of like the look. However, I still think now that we looked at this false color, I think that we need a touch more exposure all around the image. I think the image is a touch underexposed. So we can go to the exposure tab right here, and we can increase that exposure. I lowered it to 0.5, but we're just gonna go ahead and add 0.5. So now we're seeing these pinks on the hoodie, which means that this hoodie is a focal point and it's well exposed. So that's a really great tool to use, and I would highly recommend it. And yeah, now this image looks more correct. Clipping indication, turn this on as well. We'll show you what is getting destroyed. So we have a touch of destroyed information within these black bars, within this jacket. I'm not worried in the slightest about this though. If we want to fix this though, we can take this contrast wheel, we can touch it up just a touch, and yeah, that's it. But now it looks a little bit too low contrast. So now I think we're gonna opt in for this look instead. Nothing's getting clipped, and now we can turn this off. So now the full color grade, if we turn it on and off, is we have this image. I think the film grain's a little bit aggressive. I'm gonna lower that film grain down to about 15. And then I think that we want to get more pop in this hoodie. So in order to do that, I'm going to go to the saturation, and I'm going to put it back up to 1. There we go. And it looks a little bit cartoonish, but I kind of think that's the look I'm going for. And maybe we'll split the difference to saturation 95. Yeah. So I can live with this for the first image. All right, so we have our second part of the music video. This is a slow-mo of snow hitting his face, and he's raising the he's raising the flag, and yeah, it's a pretty sweet shot. So let's see what we can do with it. I have the 5 nodes set up. I have the balance node, the exposure node, the contrast node, the saturation node, and the Dehancer plugin. And my goal for this shot is to not make it film-like, but I want it to be nice and clean. I want the color to pop, and we're gonna go for a really true to color, but very enhanced and high color separation look. So let's start off with Dehancer. Let's go ahead and drag the Dehancer plugin to this node, just like this, and go ahead and choose the camera. All right, we're gonna go ahead and disable film. We're not gonna use film for this look, and we're not gonna use, we're gonna use film grain, but that'll come later down the line. So as you can see already, it's a very vibrant and colorful look. This is completely just transformed. It already looks great in my opinion. The color separation is super advanced and I love it already, but we're gonna just tweak it a little bit, not mess with it too much, and trying to keep this look kind of already how it is. So starting off with balance, we have a touch of cool temperature that I want to fix. And of course, we're gonna go to gamma, we're gonna go to linear, we're gonna go to our HDR tab, we're gonna go to our global wheel. It is color corrected by the parade's definition, but let's still touch it just a touch warmer, just to make it a little more even. So we're gonna take this little ball and we're just gonna go up, just like that, just like that. And now it's completely warm. I think we're gonna split the difference. Just like that. Okay, so now the before and after is super subtle, but it's more balanced. And now for the exposure. So I think we're gonna leave the exposure alone for now. We're gonna come back later after we get to the dehancer portion when we are doing the false colors. So let's leave this alone for now. So with the contrast, we can go to this custom curve, and we can just slightly lower that. So now our low values are a little bit closer to 0. And then the higher values, bring up just a bit. And as you can see, as I bring up this curve, see how like the peaks aren't really moving much, but the middle tones, the middle is all this information. The middle is kind of moving more than the top. And kind of that's the difference between the exposure and the contrast typically. That's why we do 2 of them separate. So let's do a little pop in the midtones. Then we can do before and after. And it's kind of subtle, but do you see like that richness that we kind of get from that contrast? It's very subtle, but it really comes through to me. Now for the saturation, I do feel like this is really, really strongly saturated. However, I'm gonna show you guys a trick. So to create a node after a node, you hold Option and S, and we're gonna call this one luminance. Now, to get this hoodie to stop being so highly saturated, we don't touch the saturation necessarily, and instead we're gonna edit the color density. So to edit the color density, we're gonna go to this custom curve right here. We're gonna go to the last one called saturation versus luminance. We're gonna grab this right here. We're gonna move it up and take that density from this. See how it's like this blood orange look? We're gonna take this and we're gonna go up, and we're gonna get it more of this like orange, kind of this more realistic and less blood orange. So if we do the before and after, this is more of the hoodie that I saw in person, and this is more of a blood orange, just oversaturated look. So this way we can preserve the saturation and yeah, not have to mess with it too much. And now time for the Dehancer plugin. So we have the input already in. The film developer we're not going to touch. The film we have disabled. Film compression we are going to enable that just to curb the highlights. You can kind of see it right here. If you look right here, super subtle. Don't really have to worry about it too much, but I like to do it out of habit. We're not going to touch the expand. We're not going to touch the print. I don't think I want to do anything to the color head. So I'm going to leave that alone. Again, we're going to a very true to look color grade here. We're not going to do anything fancy on this one. So I want to show you guys that you can do a very normal color grade with Dehancer. So the way that we're going to get this nice addition to this normally corrected look is we're going to go into the bloom. I think we're going to rely on the bloom to kind of give it this pop. So the bloom is going to be shown in these highlights. So if you want to look, see that like little lift in the entire image. I mean, even look at the parade. It really comes through, at least spikes up. We're going to keep the bloom about down to 40. We're not going to touch the film damage, the film breath, or the gate weave because we want a nice clean look for this color grade, a nice clean look. We're not going to overscan it. We're not going to vignette it, but we are going to use the monitor, of course. So now if you look at the monitor, you can see that despite how bright the image kind of looks to the eye, it still is fairly underexposed in a lot of parts, really. I mean, this entire image to me is underexposed because we want the focal points. We want the focal points to be a little bit higher than this blue level. This blue means it's kind of underexposed as a whole. So in order to do that, we're gonna go to our exposure, we're gonna go to the HDR tab, and we're gonna higher that just a bit. Okay. And now that we've hired the exposure as a whole, now we have more room in that contrast to create more dynamic range. So we're gonna go down to the contrast. We're gonna hit that, we're gonna go back to our custom curves. I'm gonna lower that just a bit, just to get more pull out of our dynamic range. So now look how much separation we have in this image. We have a very vibrant orange, a lot of separation from the background, and it looks about how it looks out of camera. Nice rich look. I think the hoodie is a touch too orange still. So we're gonna go back to the luminance. We're gonna go to the saturation versus luminance, and we're gonna lower that density just a bit more. Nice, now that's a nice orange hoodie, the one that I saw in person. So now if we go back to that false color, now we have some greens, we have some pinks, we have some grays. So now this hoodie is really the focal point of this image. I'm not too worried about having his face be the focal point and being well exposed as the hoodie in this image in particular. I think I prefer the hoodie to be the well exposed part of this image. And then clipping indication, always turn this on and see if you have any clipping. In this image we have 0 clipping, so everything is properly exposed. And then output's a fun little thing too on Dehancer. This is how you can mix the total impact of the image that you just did. Of course you do 0, it is 0 color grading. And yeah, if you do 100%, you have 100% color grading. So this is the simple, pop in the image. This is what it looks like in full motion. I think it's a bit oversaturated. Let's do like one last tweak. Let's go to the global wheel on the saturation tab. We're going to go to high dynamic range. Let's go to the global wheel. Let's lower that saturation one more time. Yeah. Maybe let's split the difference again. Okay. Very subtle changes. So yeah, we did very subtle tweaks on all of these nodes, but overall, this image, it has some separation. I think it can be a touch less contrast, just a touch. All right, and now I'm happy with it. And real quick, I just want to show you guys, for my mobile people that aren't always on their computer, you can also color grade super easily with the iOS version of Dehancer. This is an image I color graded that only took me 30 seconds on the mobile app. Let's quickly run through the app and I'll show you some cool features. So first you want to load up the image, play with the bloom. It's the same exact thing as Dehancer, but the UI is on the bottom of the screen. You can play with the prints, you can play with the films, and this is just a photo of me and my friends, and I kind of played with it after some time, and eventually it got to a point where I thought it looked kind of nice. So if this is more your style, if you want to run and gun and edit your photos or videos on your phone, it's a really easy way to do it, and it works really well, so I would highly recommend checking out the iOS app if you have the time. This is a pretty basic color grade tutorial. I can go much more in depth about how to get certain looks if you'd like. Just comment down below what you'd like to see next. And if you are interested in getting the Dehancer plugin, use the code AustinCourt. And of course, thank you for watching, guys.